This is episode 5 of the Oatmeal Uprising podcast. It is a lot about science and the interpretation of research in pop culture and on Instagram and in newspaper articles and how research is supposed to be interpreted. The main idea of this podcast comes from a lot of Instagram posts that I've been reading these days. A lot of them just go by studies say this, studies say that, and then they say a statement that is very conclusive. A lot of studies that I have read are not very conclusive. They are very speculative in nature. And whenever these Instagram posts mention this study without any citations, they are trying to catch your attention with something, and maybe they are even trying to sell some products. Since everyone in the world right now has a voice on social media, and I'm still talking about the privileged side of the world, where we get to where we are bombarded with almost everyone's voice on social media, and a lot of claims can be made in this particular scenario. These claims could be harmful, these claims could be misleading, and I wanted to shed some light on this particular topic. Let's say you would have heard headlines that go something around the lines of studies say that eating one amla a day could boost your immunity by 100%. That is quite reassuring as a headline to read, right? It's just very little. It's preying on your ability to put in a lot less effort to gain an outcome which is very favorable. That is something all humans have ever wanted. All of us want that pill, one pill to get everything that we ever wanted in our lives. So most of these advertisements are preying on this particular instinct that you have to put in less effort to get a lot of results. Now, in general, things that sound too good to be true are too good to be true, but we kind of keep on forgetting this as a fact. So, I wanted to shed some light on this particular topic because this is a personal pet peeve of mine when people reference to something in pop culture. The personal pet peeve of mine comes from people telling me that Diet Coke is bad for you. You know what else is bad for you? Being obese. Diet Coke, Diet Coke being bad for you, there are studies on that, okay? It is a class 3 carcinogen by the WHO. Aspartame is not exactly Diet Coke. But you have to take that with the full understanding of what the WHO actually means. So are cigarettes, okay? Cigarettes are a carcinogen, so is alcohol. But you have to know what they want to say when they say something. They are not just putting out blanket statements that something that is labeled as a class 3 carcinogen is directly cancer causing. Everything that you consume, there is always going to be the dosage that makes the poison. Cyanide is a very common poison, but I'm pretty sure there would be a dosage where it is not poison to you. There is always that threshold where everything starts to change in its nature, in its veracity. So it's the same thing with aspartame. So this is a very common pet peeve of mine when I'm drinking my diet cokes, when I'm enjoying them, and someone keeps on telling me that they are not good for you, and I just nod along right now because I don't have the energy to argue with everyone, but I do have the energy to put this particular one out. I've been a nerd for a long time. I've been personally reading studies for my own benefit for a long time. And what I have come to realize is that studies usually, there are a lot of caveats in studies. It is very difficult to find a study that is conclusively proving everything that you ever wanted it to prove. So most studies are not exactly designed to prove something very conclusively. They are designed on the basis of an idea and finding out to what extent that idea can be verified and to what extent it can be extrapolated. This is quite commonly the nature of most studies. Now I'm putting medical studies aside for a second, because medical studies have a lot more implications and they are done in very much more tightly controlled conditions. Also because medical studies are funded by large pharmaceutical companies mostly, and they have quite a lot of resources to control every single parameter. Still, they are not perfect. you know, but they they have the most ability to arrive to a perfect conclusion rather than any other study that was done by a college student in their college campus with very little funding. Okay, science can speak only what it observes. Okay, science will never lie to you. It is always going to be people who are going to embellish things to you and going to lie to you. So on this particular episode, we want to delve into exactly what studies are designed to conclude, what constitutes forming a study, and when you read a headline where it says studies say this and studies say that, how to take that with a grain of salt. This isn't an effort to increase cynicism or an effort to make you reliant on yourself for every particular thing. That is not universally possible, and it is very time consuming, and it is something generally that we don't want to do. What i want what i want someone listening to this podcast to take away from it is there are caveats to everything. There are caveats to way studies are done, and there are caveats to way studies are supposed to be mhm, studies are supposed to be interpreted, right? So we'll be moving forward to that, and without further ado, let's just dive right into how exactly studies are designed. What exactly is the agenda of actually going through with and designing studies. Yeah. So, what exactly is the purpose of doing a study, and how exactly is a study formulated? Most importantly, the very basic thing that you have to understand is every study is trying to answer a very particular question. It's not vague at most times, it's very particular. Let's say I am a person who is very susceptible to a lot of inflictions around him. Let's say I just get the flu whenever the flu season is in effect. No, despite having the shots, despite being vaccinated all the time, I get all the common cold, fever. I get viral fever. If that is the case, then there is a strong indication that my immunity is lacking somewhere, and I want to see what will boost the immunity. Now, I read somewhere that vitamin C, overdosing on vitamin C, is actually going to increase my immunity by quite a lot. So, I am going to try to design a study in such a way that the best I could do is find individuals like me who are inflicted with the same problem, who are susceptible to the same inflictions, and then I'm going to overdose them on vitamin C, and then I'm going to not overdose them on vitamin C and find out what is exactly going on in this case. Is the immunity getting boosted or not? Now, when you are trying to design a particular study that is supposed to answer or give you an understanding of one particular question, one particular thought, you are going to design the study in such a way that that particular thought has some kind of conclusions associated with it. The only thing that I wanted to conclude in this particular example was whether vitamin C in itself is going to impact my immunity. That means every other factor in the lifestyle of whatever control group or whatever group I'm using for whatever group I'm using for the study needs to stay as consistent as possible. So I'm supposed my intent is to discover only one particular area. Everything apart from this is not relevant to this study. Okay. So vitamin C is my goal. So I go ahead, I get very little funding. I find five subjects who said, okay, said. Now this is the first flag. Who said that they are susceptible to infections. It is difficult to verify that. Okay, they said that you asked for some kind of verification. Okay, so they gave you medical records of the last 18 months. Every time there was a flu season, they checked the boxes that they got inflicted with the flu and they had to take medication. Now, this is less verifiable, okay, because medical records can be tampered with. There is always a possibility, okay. You got a very small sample size because you don't have the funding. You don't have the funding to do a background check. You don't have a funding to do verifications, okay. So, this is your first bottleneck, okay. Let's say I'm an Indian and I'm doing this study outside India. That is my second bottleneck. I'm most likely to find candidates which are not exactly similar to me. Now, not exactly similar is mean uh, is going towards their demographic particular information. Now, this demographic information will go through that what changes can be there in demographics and how they particularly impact an outcome of a study. But what we want to say is that one more variable is introduced into the mix now. Okay, they are different from me. Okay, so the conclusion, so the intent was to do that for me. Okay, and for people like me. But the thing is that it cannot be generalized to the entire population of the entire world. Okay, so this is where demographics come in. So we already, it's a very small study and we already found two caveats to whatever we are going to conclude. Okay. So let's say I do the study. I have very little time. So okay, time is my resource. So I get 4 weeks to do the study. I don't have a control group. I just have five subjects, right? So now let's say I lucked out and found the five subjects to be all male. Okay, I am a male. It is going to impact the conclusions of my study, but I can't. Right now, I got straight up one bottleneck is that whatever conclusion I'll have, I cannot reliably extrapolate on it onto a female population. I got male members as my subjects. I cannot, in any good conscience, extrapolate it to a female population and say that the same findings would be supported in the general population. I am only allowed to publish and I'm only allowed to write facts in a study. This is science. This is not my feelings, right? So I designed the study. I gave my participants 4 weeks. I don't have a control group, so I'll have to make sure these particular subjects are my control group. So randomly, I'll have to assign them 2 weeks. Let's say 2 weeks of uh, high vitamin C diets or some kind of protocol, and then I have to give them 2 weeks of some kind of placebo or something like that. Okay, uh, so they have to think that all 4 weeks they would be subjected to the same treatment, but it would not be the same. Their informed consent would be taken, but they wouldn't know at what time they are given placebo and at what time they are given the actual vitamin C. So that is how I would be designing the study. And then after finding out after whatever findings I have, let's say I try to get them into conditions where they are supposed to catch the flu. Okay, so after this particular after 2 weeks I do one measurement, and after the next 2 weeks I do the other measurement, and I find out that there is no significant difference. Okay, does that mean vitamin C does not work? I have no idea actually. I just said I can only conclude what I saw in this particular demographic, and given this particular constraints, there is no actual impact on immunity from vitamin C overdose. Now, uh, I need more factors. If this is where I want to stop with my particular study and I am no longer curious, I stop here. But if I want to further this particular discussion, this topic is worth delving into. I have to find some reason where this particular topic is worth delving into, and that has to be done before the study is designed. You have to know exactly what your possible outcomes could be. So you are supposed to measure more things. Okay, so you can't directly measure immunity by infections. So now you are going to check the blood levels. Okay, going to check the white blood cell count. You are going to check the platelet count and all that. If you find variations in that, even slight variations that somehow come to be statistically significant, there's a scientist hook into asking for funding to do more research. Okay, because at the end of the day we are all governed by economies in such a way that we are dependent on money. We can't do studies without enough of a backing for us. So a scientist is going to do that. They are going to introduce a hook into the study and write that as a discussion, this particular topic is worth delving into more, and what you could do with it. So that is how a study would be designed. Now, an interpretation of this study is going to say that vitamin C has no difference. A particular headline you can say: studies say that vitamin C has no outcome on your immunity, or studies say that vitamin C increases your immunity by 100%. So, something that the study was not designed to conclude is interpreted as such in pop culture media. And you have seen this example. I'm pretty sure all of us have seen this example these days, more and more these days than you have seen it earlier before, because you are bombarded with these kind of posts a lot more. They are trying to sell you something. Okay. If I am selling a vitamin C supplement, if I'm selling a 300% RDA of vitamin C in a supplement, which costs me which whatever it costs me, I'm going to sell it for three times the margin. So if I say that it is backed by science, people are going to buy my product, and I'm well within my rights to say that because there is no one to fact check me. There are no laws, because in a way you are not wrong. If you use your wording carefully enough, the study was saying that. But if you mislead it, then you become a liability, and then there is a risk. But there is that very the gray area in this particular context is quite wide. So you can, if your wording is good enough, you can advertise something in your product that it is not designed to do, and you can reference it with science, and now you have backing and you have credibility behind your product, and now you can make your sales based on that. And that is something that annoys me to quite a bit of an extent, is I'm supposed to take things with a grain of salt. I can't just be trusting everything that I see online, and it's frustrating, I know. But at the same time, what's more frustrating is the people who are not aware of this, the people who are not aware that caveats do exist in every study, caveats do exist in every headline that you read, and that part is even more frustrating to me, because businesses thrive on the gullibility of people right now these days. And I know it sounds kind of I'm being a negative Nancy on this particular topic, and I'm not supporting science. That's not true. I support science in what science is designed to do. You have to understand, when you take anecdotal evidence, for example, you have to understand what the value of anecdotal evidence is in the constraint that it was done. Okay. So later on we'll be delving into one study that is quite popular in pop culture. We'll be going through the exact study, but this is how universally studies are designed. Okay. So this is where the misinterpretations can come from. Okay. Now, this is my favorite part about studies, okay? This is my favorite part about studies that are done in the Western world and are not applicable to our country. India is very different than most of the world, and at the same time, most of the world is very different from India. And this boils down to demographic information, or exactly who the studies are done on. So, you take the journey of the world. Uh, Firstly, I'm introducing this as a caveat to whatever I'm going to say next. Why science is important is, before everything can be verified, you need some kind of thought process. Okay. So, very small observations that you see in the world, that philosophers saw in this world, they knew that this observation couldn't be directly verified, but maybe someday, within more controlled environments, whatever they thought could be verified. And for that, you have to start somewhere, and that is where science starts. It starts at a place which is not exactly going to benefit future generations, but at the same time, it is helpful in moving the conversation ahead. Okay, so science comes in there, it comes in small chunks so that it could move the conversation ahead. Okay, so yeah, coming back to demographics now, why demographics are important in this study. I think the terminology used is weird. Okay, it's an acronym for Western, educated, uh, what was I? I'm blacking out on what I was. Mm, okay, I'll come back to that. If it comes back to me, I will say what I was. Okay, there is rich, sorry, Western, educated, rich, then democratic is there. Yeah, I'm very annoyed at myself for not remembering what I was. But anyway, uh, that is usually the kind of thing that you'll be going through. Wait, let me reference my notes. Okay, yeah. So I is industrialized, right? So weird is the acronym which we are going to reference for demographic information. So Western. So most studies are done on Western civilizations, which are quite different from traditional civilizations, which means the applicability of a Western civilized study is going to decrease the further and further you move away from the West. So a developed country like European or North American countries or China or Japan or South Korea, these countries are going to have a population which is quite westernized, and the applicability of studies vary considerably based on where the subject population is based on. Okay, then we are coming to an educated versus an uneducated population. Now, when you give informed consent to the patients or the subjects of your study, the ability of them to understand what the study is, what they are being subjected to, it actually is going to affect the outcome of the study. Your knowledge and certainty or possibility of something happening to you at the end of a particular period of time is going to hamper the observations in the study. It is going to hamper whatever the study is supposed to conclude. Okay, so that is your second part of the demo demographic information. Coming to the industrialized section, so uh, when subjects are selected, they are usually selected in the same age range, or if variability is needed in the study, you see variable ranges in the studies. But yeah, you have to consider whether the population is currently a working population or not, whether they wanted to do the study or whether they were coerced into doing the study. That is also an important thing about demographic information. Then coming to the rich part of it, whether the study was done on individual who had sufficient financial backing towards them, or whether they were doing the study to get payment from it. Studies do pay you as a subject, mostly medical trials. If you're subjecting yourself to a medical trial, potentially harmful medications, in that case you would be paid because you may become a liability if you're not paid. So in that case, the demographic information is supposed to indicate in a particular study, whoever you are, if you're doing a study, you are supposed to indicate what your demographic is. Okay, so you are supposed to tell them whether you are supposed to tell your you are supposed to mention in your paper whether your demographic information is well off or not. And the last part of it is democratic, whether the whether the individuals volunteered on their own accord, whether it was the safest possible choice for them or whether they were coerced into a study. Now, I have no particular evidence to say this, so this is just on the top of my head. But if I'm in a dictatorship, if I am a particular dictator, and if I want to subjugate my if I want to subjugate my population, I am going to use every tool in my arsenal to subjugate them. Ruthlessness comes from that part. So if I wanted to subjugate them, and if I had to use science as an example, I would coerce people and a population into a study and conclude something that is just arbitrary on the basis of what I want people to be told. That can always happen in science as well. Science is not immune to politics. In that sense, you have to understand how and where a study has been done. Okay, if a study has been done 30 years ago, 50 years ago in the Soviet Union, if a study was done during the Cold War or during the arms race or during the period where Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project was going on, you have to understand when a study was done. So these are the particular things that you have to be mindful about demographics. I'm saying this in very particular because more and more studies are related to psychiatric issues these days, and psychiatric issues comes with a lot of constraints on your particular demographic. As a person, where you are situated, as a person, what is your financial backing, as a person, what is the ability and freedoms you have in your life, it is very different from what a study would be done on. As an Indian, and the amount of freedom of speech you have is going to have a different outcome of your on your particular mental health than, let's say, a European person with a lot of freedom of speech and movement would be able to. So that is the kind of information and caveats that people need to understand a lot more when they read headlines. When you read headlines, they are, firstly, they are not going to even cite the study. Okay, they are not supposed to, they are not liable to, no one is making them cite the study. Even if they do, okay, most people won't read beyond the abstract of a study. The abstract does not guarantee you what the study is inferencing at the very end. The abstract is a hook. At its very core, the abstract is a hook for you to read the study. Now, there are some factors that we have to get into about how. Now, I don't want people to go and read studies in detail and then only trust what they read. That is not the goal of this. Okay, we don't want to be that cynical of an individual that we just lose trust in the world. But there are some pointers that you can effectively use in a way to understand what you can trust, what source of information you can trust, and what you take with a grain of salt. Okay, so more than likely you are going to read a blanket statement online. Okay, so when you read a blanket statement, you have to understand the pillars behind that blanket statement. So let's say you read a statement like testosterone helps build muscle. Studies conclusively prove this. Okay. So now you read this particular headline. Now the most important word in this headline is something that you don't carefully observe. Most people won't carefully observe. They read the first part, they don't read the second part. The second part, the first word is studies, plural. They are putting two and two together. Okay, so this is something that you have to understand. They are putting two and two together, they are putting multiple studies together which are not conclusively designed to prove this particular thing as a fact. Okay, so there may be a study that says that workouts increase your testosterone. Okay, now this is one study. Now there would be another study that says testosterone increases muscle mass. They are combining these two studies. Okay, so this is plural, they are putting two and two together. There is no there may not be a single study which says workouts increase testosterone and testosterone builds muscle mass, so testosterone builds muscle mass through workouts. Okay, that is not, there is no single study, there might be no single study designed to actually prove that. There are multiple studies that they are referencing. Now they are putting two and two together. Now the two parts of this, you have to understand whether the two is actually two. If they are taking one study in its entirety and they are taking something from the study which it was not designed to conclude, then it's just wrong to take that particular piece of information. Okay, it's either wrong or it's misleading. Okay, or, and one more thing that it could happen, it is only true to a particular extent. Okay, so now you found some caveats just from this one word, right? Studies. Now whatever your headline is, it is always going to no, this is this headline. If you go delve deep into the article, they may mention that they have referenced these particular studies, or they have referenced these particular journals. Now you have to understand where the information came from, the source of the information. You saw the headline, okay, you got a little bit of cynicism inside you, you know that it is multiple studies. Now you're reading through this article, which is still a pretty short article, okay, or you are listening to a podcast which is going to be a short podcast, or whatever, something you can spend your time on. If you can't spend your time on something, I would say whenever you read something that says studies says, just don't trust it and move on with your life. Okay, if you want to trust something, just give it, if you want to trust something and apply it to your lives, give it at least some amount of time. Otherwise, it's just not worth it trusting blanket statements if they are not conclusively proven. Okay. So yeah, if you have some particular time, you're reading through a short article about this particular headline that you read, then you have to understand if the headline came from a reputed source. If they are referencing a journal which is somewhere in Dhaka, Bangladesh, where where studies are not done that seriously, where there is not a lot of oversight or committee or peer reviews going on in studies. In that case, you have to understand that it is not coming from a reputable source. It's just a headline, okay, and you have to take that with that grain of salt. If it is coming from a reputable source, then there more than likely a lot the parts of it which it is designed to conclude are going to be true, okay. Uh, very you have to understand where what the intent of that journal or what the intent of that publication is. If the intent of that publication is to further science, it is going to be a good one, more or less. On an average, it is going to be a good point of reference to trust that study. But if it is done, if you are reading about a drug that is good for you and it is done by a pharmaceutical company that sells you that drug, you have to understand that they have an incentive to promote this particular study. They have this incentive to perform this study in a particular way that their drug comes out on top. And their side effects could be something that is listed at the bottom, which you it is the bottom line which no one is going to read. So you have to understand these particular caveats. You have to understand whether a blanket statement is done for a short period of time, or whether it is applicable for entirety of your lifetime, whether it is applicable to your particular demographic, whether it will be applicable where you reside, or what your economic condition is like, or what your mental health is like, what the stresses in your life is. So you have to understand the applicability of every statement that is generalized and comforting for you to read is not always going to be completely applicable to you. So that is the grain of salt that I was talking about. And I'm loud and a little bit frustrated because I've been seeing quite a lot about people just blanketly passing on statements around with each other, even in their communities. That could be misleading. That could be that could be potentially harmful, you know. So I would say, when you are doing a trial and error on yourself, understand that you are doing a trial and error on yourself. Okay, if you want to try something, it's amazing. Just make sure you're being safe. That is the only thing that I would want people to be. They have to understand that in that case, whatever they are taking as a blanket information, it is not supposed to be implemented for the rest of your life unless you have enough particular evidence that it is going to work for you. Okay, and then the third thing that I have to come up with is that trust the experts. Okay, it is hard to say that, but if you're going to a doctor who has been through 9+ years of medical school and has 6+ years of experience diagnosing people, you can trust them. Okay, it is their job. It is their job to read studies. Okay, if you are coming to an if you're coming to an app developer and you use your pop culture buzzwords and AI generation, uh, whatever thing that you have read on LinkedIn about creating your own apps, you have to understand that that person has been doing this for a long particular amount of time, and it is their opinion that you can't trust. It's always a possibility that someone with credentials has no credibility. But that, what else are you going to do? Are you going to do everything for yourself? It is not feasible to do everything for yourself. You live in a society, and that means depending on each other. So you are always going to depend on each other. So I would say trusting the experts is something that I think this is the statement people take with more grains of salt than they take blanket statements. People are more likely to uh, trust the people who speak in a way that uh, entices you. You know, someone who speaks like me would maybe influence my opinion a lot more than someone who does not, who someone who is not in my field. And that is something that even I struggle with at times. I have read a lot of studies, and at the same time, even I forget that the applicability of one particular concept and the extrapolation it does, it just gets lost in translation. So there is no malicious intent usually behind it. It's sometimes the intent is not to sell something, it's just misinformation. And you have to understand that it is not always malicious. but you also have to understand that you are responsible for yourself, and in that particular case going with the expert's opinion is going to benefit you quite a lot more than anything else around you. Okay, now uh, going to the next topic is why exactly this particular thing is important to life. Why can't things be very simple? Why can't government enforce everyone to speak the truth and nothing but the truth? Okay, you have to understand is they are speaking the truth. They are exactly writing. So when a research paper is written, it is vetted, and they are writing exactly what the research concludes. What they are doing after that is speculation, and they term it as speculation. You are allowed to speculate. Okay, if as human beings, we judge people on a daily basis. Okay, so if you see a lot of cultural differences exist. Okay, if we are saying the celebration of a festival in a particular way, we are deemed to actually take away things from it. We are going to observe things, okay, and we are going to speculate why something is happening. The exact same way scientists are supposed to speculate why something is happening. At the same time, a scientist is interested in furthering their research. The goal is to come to 100% certainty, and if you can get to 10%, you have to go through this particular hurdles. You have to go to 10% certainty, you have to go to 15% certainty, and then you have to increase by decreasing the variables in your study parameters. You keep on decreasing the variables, and for that you need quite a lot of funding. For example, when you're doing a study as a college student, who has no funding, and college gives you very small amount of funding, you are going to reach out to random people in the university who had nothing better to do than participate in your study, and somehow you lucked out, you got a participation, and this is not the entire audience that this is not the audience that you wanted, but this is the audience you got stuck with. So you are supposed to do the study on that. Now your results are tainted by the demographic information in that case, and you had lack of money. So you are supposed to say that. You are supposed to say that in your study, and most likely you would be saying that. If any valuable journal is going to pick up your paper, you are supposed to say all the facts loudly and clearly. You are supposed to say in your particular study how old your subjects were they all male, and whether your study was designed to conclude on a population or only on the male or female population. You are supposed to confirm everything that you write in the paper, and then the journal is going to pick that study up. It is going to publish your conclusions, and it is going to publish your speculation, because even the journal wants to stay relevant in this field. So you have to understand that the world does not work on zeros and ones. There is a lot of moral gray area in this world. So and not all of it is malicious. A lot of it could be malicious, of course, but not all of it is going to be malicious. You have to understand the intent behind the study, and they intend to take it further. Okay, a lot of studies based on training were done in the late 80s, 90s. Okay, they were designed to conclude very little things. Okay, but they were extrapolated and highlighted in ways that more funding could be obtained, because this was worth looking into. We'll be going through one of those studies later on, but that is what I want you to take from this. Most studies do not conclude anything without a shadow of a doubt. Okay, they conclude what they set out to do. Okay, they observe things, and they write a conclusion based on that observation, which is going to be a very small part of what you are shown as a conclusion of a study or multiple studies. Okay, so take things with a grain of salt, and at the same time you're supposed to rely on experts. I would say not podcasters like me. I'm not going to be researching and reading 20,000 studies with you. You are supposed to understand that there are researchers who actually coalesce studies together and then prove, or and then analyze the study, which are called meta-analysis. They analyze the studies and the outcomes based on these studies, and then they publish their observations. So that this is the way most professionals advance in their particular fields. you know so take things with a grain of salt, and then at the same time understand the limitations of whatever you are reading. Okay, Now we'll go into a section that interests me quite a lot, but it is going to be boring to most people. I'm going to be studying, reading a very famous peer-reviewed article from 1990 that has been referenced quite a lot in pop culture and at the same time misinterpreted quite a lot as well. So we'll be going through that study and see how it is supposed to be interpreted and how it isn't being interpreted. Okay. We're going to pick up a case study that is from Kramer and colleagues from 1990. It is from the Journal of Applied Physiology. Yeah, it is from the Journal of Applied Physiology, an article that came back in October of 1990, edition 69. I'll be putting a link down to the article in the description section as well, and I'm going to read this out of a PDF. And please do not ask me where I found the PDF. You find it by legitimate sources. I cannot exactly tell you where to find the PDF for legal reasons. Now, without further ado, we'll be going through the study. So, what we'll be going through is we'll be going through the demographic information of the study, the intent of the study, the conclusions of the study, and I'm going to just tell you about how it has been cited in pop culture and in referenced articles as well. In headlines, how it has been interpreted. So, without further ado, let me go through with the study. All right. So, we are looking at this article. We are looking at this article called Hormonal and Growth Factor Responses to Heavy Resistance Exercise Protocols. Okay, this is done by Kramer and colleagues in 1990. Okay, so what we what we have to first understand is why this study was done. Okay, so they wanted to examine endogenous anabolic hormone and growth factor responses to various heavy resistance exercise protocols, HREPs, heavy resistance exercise protocols. This particular this is the intent of the study. They wanted to study exactly what was the acute response, anabolic response to heavy intense training. All right. So now you have to understand from this particular statement is exactly how they are going to design the study. Okay, so we have to go with the methods. Now they are supposed to print out everything, right? As I have been stating earlier, the study is going to say everything that it did and what it concluded from that. So in this methodology, if as you can see, 9 healthy male subjects they had taken. So the sample population is less because you can understand funding for this particular thing would have been very limited. It's something that is a very niche thing. Exercise physiology has always been niche and has always had very less funding to it. So 9 healthy male subjects were told to participate in this particular investigation. Their physical characteristics are stated. Their age had a tolerance about 4 years from 24, 4 standard deviations from 24 as their age. And then height was around 178 centimeters, which would be the average height for this particular country. And with a tolerance of around 8 centimeters, then body mass of 81 plus minus 12. So you may lie in this particular range, you may not lie in this particular range, and this is something that you are supposed to interpret from the study. So whether this is applicable to you or not, if the subjects differed from you in such a way that they were very different from you, then of course it is not going to be something that is useful to you. Then at the same time, their oxygen consumption was measured, their body fat was measured. Body fat, again, when you say body fat as a measurement, now this is a sidebar, but body fat as the measurement techniques of body fat vary quite a lot as well. And if it is not done by MRI, that particular statistics becomes more for eyeballing than an actual statistic to be used to conclude what the study is going to conclude. But they did not know that in 1990. All right. So 2 weeks was utilized for experimental protocol familiarization, their testing and load verification. Okay. Uh, they had used hydrostatic weighing with a computer interface load cell and standard body composition methodology to measure the body fats. Now this later on came out to have enough tolerance that it is still used in studies, but it has a lot of tolerance. So every study done with it is going to be taken with that caveat. Usually it is MRIs that we go for right now. We don't go for, it is considered as something that is going to be more accurate than this. All right. So, yeah. So, this is the particular statistics of the individual. Then they were subjected to strength workout. Okay, they were given primary exercise protocol in this particular range. They used a 5 repetitions max load and 3 minute rest period between sets and exercises. All right, so this was considered a hypertrophy workout for them. Usually hypertrophy workout is in the range of 5 to 15, I think, right now, for from where science is. So yeah, this is the methodology they conducted. Now what they did in the protocol, we have to see the experimental protocol. All right, so 1 week separated each randomized experimental protocol. Okay, so they had multiple protocols, like different kind of exercise protocols, and in them 1 week was separated between them. Okay, so subjects had to refrain from the congestion of alcohol or caffeine. Now, as you read that, the the purveyors of the study cannot make sure that the subjects were actually refraining. There may be a case that a subject lied and it did not show up on the test or something like that. All right. So subjects refrain from ingestion of alcohol or caffeine for 24 hours. So this particular thing is done to limit one more variable. Caffeine is a variable in studies, so that is removed. Yeah, so resistance exercise was controlled as well in this particular station. So this study was done, if you go back to the methodologics section, this study was done with experienced lifters. They had recreational experience in lifting. They did not have comparative experience. That means their ability to push beyond a certain boundary was limited. Okay, and all 9 individuals were similar. So this study is particularly supposed to be extrapolated, only understanding that as a caveat. But you have to understand this is 1990. This study is done to further the conversation more than it is done to verify something conclusively. All right. Yeah. So we are going to go with the results now. In general, this investigation demonstrated variations in response patterns between different heavy resistance exercise protocols. So, different protocols were used, as we said earlier, and they are supposed to investigate and see what is going to happen. So, we are going to go with the figure and see. We can skip the figure, we can just see what they have written. All right. So, the responses of serum glucose and blood lactate are increasing with, so post analyze and pre-exercise values show a variation in them. All right. So if you go to this this one, right? So pre-exercise, post-exercise, you can see the window in series 1 and series 2. So there is very mild elevation in, there is very mild decline in the serum glucose levels, and then you can see pre-exercise, post-exercise. In this particular, on the x-axis, you can see what the variation in blood lactate is. So blood lactate increase, lactic acid, of course. The fatigue when increase. Now we know it is, of course. At that time they did not know that when fatigue increases, the lactic acid is going to increase in the muscle, and what they saw is this serum blood lactate level had increased. Okay, so they had taken measurements pre-exercise, mid-exercise, and post-exercise, and this is what this is what they saw as an observation in this particular graphs. The same thing, the same observations they did with serum testosterone levels. So serum testosterone, they have done this study in nanomoles per liter, which is usually the which is usually the units you go with when you are doing studies. If you're doing blood work, you go with nanograms per deciliter. So if the numbers do not make sense to you, it's because it's in a different unit. So you can see that it varies. The variance that was observed between pre to post exercise did not follow a particular pattern. Okay, you can see a particular increase, but you cannot see a particular pattern that can conclusively prove exactly what serum testosterone is going to increase like. All right. Now, and same thing they are going to do with human growth hormone. Okay, human growth hormone was the prime anabolic response that they were searching for, because it was believed at that particular point of time that growth hormone is going to, induce growth. So at that time, this was their main parameter for the study, and as you can see, it from pre to post exercise, they found a significant increase in the statistically significant increase in the human growth hormone levels. You can see the units in microgram per liter, and in the series 1, in the series 2 graph, you can see that their serum growth hormone level was increased acutely to a high point and then went back to the baseline after some time. So 2 hours post exercise, it did go back to rest. Okay, so that is what they had observed from this particular graph. All right. So we can go, this is what the results of the study were. Now if we go to the conclusions of the study, yeah, so before we go to the discussion, which is actual main point of the study. So in the series 1 of the workout, no significant differences were observed in whole blood lactate when the load was lightened. That means when the conclusion had to be derived from what the load was in that particular series. So whether a 5 rep max is a heavier load and a 10 rep max is a lighter load. Of course, this is like in your common sense terms, it would be like you can do more repetitions with lighter weight and you can do less repetitions with your with heavier weight. So that was the variable point. All right, in series 1, significant decreases were observed in whole blood lactate at mid exercise. So their observations were stated as the juxtaposition to what they were supposed to infer. Then they did the same thing with serum testosterone, and then they did the same thing with human growth hormone levels. All right. At the end of it, this study was not actually designed to study hypertrophic response. Okay, they were designed to see blood work. Okay, what changes were there in your blood work and the blood work of the individuals. All right. So in this discussion, now discussion is not conclusive proof. Okay, so they are going to reference what they have earlier and what they had earlier in studies, like what their citations are going to be, what their inspirations were for the study, and they are going to see what extrapolations can be made from the results that they particularly saw. Heavy resistance exercise has been shown to be a potent stimulus for increase in muscle cell size. Okay, so this particular study was not designed to do to not designed to conclude on muscle cell size. Okay, so this study was doing only hormonal thing, only the anabolic hormone response. So they wanted to see, so as I have mentioned, the link between the concomitant and in vivo changes of endogenous anabolic hormones and tissue growth has not been specifically determined. So they have not determined yet, as of the time of study, whether the anabolic response was the reason for whether the anabolic hormone response was the reason for muscle growth, okay, or whether it was just the act of lifting the weights. So they wanted to investigate this. So this investigation was the first step in, this is a very key thing that they have written. It's the first step in future examination of such relationships. This study was not designed to conclusively prove anything. It had 9 subjects. You had even the even the people who conducted the exercise wanted you to know that this was not designed to prove conclusively that testosterone is going to increase and this testosterone is going to cause muscular hypertrophy in untrained individuals. All right, that was not the point of the study. The point of the study was to move the discussion further, get more funding, okay, get more research, remove the other variables. That was the point of the study. So as particular this case study was done, so we are going to stop with the case study. But as this case study was done, this was the point of this case study. You wanted to you wanted to understand why this particular study was done and what it was supposed to conclusively prove and what it was supposed to just speculate. Most of science starts from the point of speculation. All right. So if an article references this particular study and says that testosterone increases after muscular hypertrophy, they are not going to tell you if the increase in testosterone and human growth hormone is going to be acute versus it is going to be chronic. They are not going to tell you whether this was done from a male perspective or a female perspective, whether it is applicable to every particular demographic in the world, whether it is they are not even going to tell you whether this was heavy exercise or light exercise or how hard you had to push. They are just going to print a headline. Okay, and that headline is not conclusive evidence of anything. That headline is just a hook to get you in. And you have to understand that you can't just move past the headline and say, oh, yes, I'm going to do nothing. I'm going to just go through the motion and I'll get all the benefits from it. That's not how things work. You have to understand. You have to know you in this particular case, if you just don't even if you just stay with the headline, you are not even moving past anything else. You are not even understanding what they wanted you to understand. That was not the intent of it. That was a hook to get you in. All right, exactly like this study was. This study was a hook to get people to get more funding, more or less. All right. So yeah, that was my entire point for this particular rant, and I'm pretty glad I went into my nerdy side for this. I have been reading studies for quite a lot of time for my particular sense of enjoyment. It's just fun to see what people could do with the hands that they were dealt. If you are an individual who is very interested in studies, you have to understand that funding is very difficult to come by, and you have to jump through hoops and find speculation from your studies that is going to further the conversation very well. This particular article is one of the most referenced articles that I have seen in quite a while, so I took this article as an example. But yeah, this was very fun for me as well, and I hope you took something from this particular episode. So this has been episode 5 of the Oatmeal Uprising podcast, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.